Another EU summit, another EU crisis, as leaders gathered remotely to discuss the desperately needed coronavirus recovery fund and budget. But all is on hold as Hungary and Poland have effectively vetoed the process, claiming a mechanism linking future transfers of money to the issue of the rule of law was part of an unfair ideological battle being waged by Brussels.
There was a deal stuck at the European Council meeting in July between heads of state and government. That was a good deal, a deal that was about Europe, about helping the European economy and European people in need, in trouble, in the middle of this pandemic. And that's the way forward. It stated clearly that the financial interests of the European Union must be saved and safeguarded, and there's no debate about that whatsoever. But when we talk about the rule of law, which is not clearly defined, and it's an ideological sort of subjective matter that one side of the arena has been misusing, then that must not be linked to any functioning of the EU.
But opposition politicians in Hungary are keen to point out that this view is not shared by everyone.
It's very important to state that over 70% of Hungarians support the rule of law conditionality. Hungarian businesses, Hungarian municipalities need the money from the recovery fund from the next year's multi-annual budget. And the opposition trying to send a message to the world that Mr. Orbán does not equal Hungary, that there is indeed a significant demand for the conditionality mechanism, and also that we don't want to block the MFF as Hungarians.
Some view this as a pivotal moment for the European Union, when leaders must stand firm against Hungary and Poland.
If you want to be a member of the European Union, you need to respect the rule of law. That means you need to have a judiciary which is independent. You need to have a media which is absolutely free to say what they want within the constitutional limitations. Those violations have been occurring for too long. They've been systemic, they've been persistent, they've been recognized by all kinds of organizations around the world. Is not possible, is no longer acceptable to be a member of the European Union like Poland and Hungary, to receive European funds and not to respect the rule of law.
There was little expectation that this summit would manage to finalise a deal, and indeed this mechanism would not ultimately solve the rule of law issue. But with time not on their side and Europe's economies facing deeper recessions, EU leaders will be hoping a compromise can be found, and soon. Darren McCaffrey, Euronews, Brussels.
I don't think it's a constitutional crisis. I think we have a tendency to over-dramatize the present as much as we actually over-rationalize the past. I think we're in a typical negotiating situation where there's a bit of back and forth. And then at the end of the day, what you try to do is to find a solution. I actually think that Poland and Hungary don't have many avenues out of this, and the rest of the leaders know it. And there's a bit of a feeling, to use the Italian term, basta. This is enough. They need the money. They're going to have to adopt the rule of law mechanism, but they want to come out of it saying to their own public, look, we won in the negotiations.
So how do you see this playing out? What kind of compromise do you think all parties would be able to agree to?
If you look at the current wording, I don't think there's going to be much compromise there. I mean, usually what happens in these situations is that there's some sort of a declaration about, sovereignty and culture and things like that. But I think the mechanism is going to stand. And the interesting thing is that quite often in MFF or financial budgetary negotiations, there's very much a sort of an opposition between the European Parliament and then the Council. Now, I think 25 leaders can very well use the leverage that the European Parliament gives in this negotiating position. The trialogue that took place between the European Parliament, the Commission and the Council was a very tough one, and that simply is not going to change. Now, you asked earlier whether this is a constitutional crisis. I'd more put it as, to a certain extent, it's an identity thing, and I do think it's one of the most important decisions that the European Union is going to take in a while. Principled, value-based decisions, because, if we don't stick to the rule of law, we basically have nothing.
So what do you think Hungary and Poland are trying to achieve? Are they just playing to a domestic audience, but eventually they will agree to the terms?
Yeah, definitely. This is what happens. Remember, I've sat around European negotiating tables pretty much since 1995 when we joined, negotiating the Amsterdam Treaty, Nice Treaty, Constitutional Convention in Lisbon. And there's always what we call this two-level game. So on one hand, you have to negotiate in Brussels or virtual, as the case might be at the moment. And then on the other hand, you have to sell the negotiating result at home. That's why you see a lot of leaders coming into a European Council, through the presser and the doorstep saying, I am here to defend our national interests. And then when they come out, look what I got from these negotiations. And that's, I guess, one of the problems with the European Councils. You get 27 different messages. But at the end of the day, on this one as well, we are going to get a deal. That deal is going to be good. The 750 billion euro rescue package, recovery package is going to be there. And the rule of law principle is going to be there, whether Orban likes it or not.
It's a very positive outlook for you on how this might progress. How's it playing
very
out?
Realistic. I've been there so many times
Realistic
before.
Is
This is simply going to happen. I mean,
Do you think the rest of the world sees it like
of what
that?
Orban is doing. Sorry?
Maybe. Do you think the rest of the world sees it like that? Because I know that Hillary Clinton was at the European University Institute yesterday. Outside of Europe's borders, how are people seeing this sort of showdown play out?
Yeah, I mean, we opened our academic year here yesterday with Hillary, and we had a wonderful conversation. We did touch upon the future of democracy, and two observations on that. She talked a lot about the American transition and the rest of the world looking at what's happening. And of course, previously transitions have been much easier. And in many ways, you have to accept the democratic result. That's the basis of the rule of law. And the second answer is, hey, the same applies for Europe as well. You have rules and regulations. Jean Monnet, back in the good old days, used to say that nothing is possible without humans, nothing is lasting without institutions. I guess we could say that nothing is possible without values, but nothing is lasting without the rule of law. And that's probably a message that Hillary would push as well. So in that sense, it's a crucial moment, I think, for democracy and what we stand for and our values.